she's making some bold claims today. Do I really mean any child? Yeah, I do mean engage any child in learning. That is because, sadly, what I am not giving you in this video is a step-by-step list of exactly what to do and say to that child, more some general principles to follow. Because, of course, as the teacher, you are the expert. You know the child you're teaching, you know how to teach, you know how to do this. Let's go. Also, if anyone does actually have that list, that would be great because I'm yet to find one. Hello, I'm Sarah. I was a primary school teacher for 10 years and now I run my own tutoring business, and I work with children with a whole range of different needs and in a whole range of different situations. Lots of them, sadly, have had quite negative experiences with school and what they perceive as learning. And we overcome those in tutoring sessions by working together to help them find the joy in learning and get to where they want to go. It can be really difficult. I will not sugarcoat that. But that's why I'm in tutoring. I imagine if you're watching this video, that is probably why you teach too. So in this video, I have 5 principles to work from when engaging children in your lessons. This is thinking more from the perspective of one-to-one or a small group than a whole class. Personally, these were things I found difficult, if not impossible, to do in a whole class situation. However, that does not mean that they're impossible to accomplish in a school setting. It just takes a bit more creativity and lateral thinking. Now, the most important thing with these ideas is that, of course, nothing will work for everyone. Everyone is different. Some students completely throw you off. They're totally engaged even though they have absolutely no relationship with the teacher whatsoever, or they just are really intimidated by competitive games and hate them and don't want to play. All of your normal go-tos just don't work with that child. But know your pupils. That's where you start in all of this, and then work with them. Work with those quirks, work with those differences, make the lessons work for them. All right, tip number 1, the obvious one, make it fun. Everyone wants to do stuff when it's more fun. If it's sitting down, doing a worksheet, a lot of it on their own with someone watching over their shoulder, they probably won't engage with that learning. I imagine most people watching this is teaching you to suck eggs. We know this, but crikey, it can be exhausting trying to keep the fun level high. Week after week, lesson after lesson, day after day, however often you're teaching. I have a whole series of videos coming up that I'm excited to make about my favourite games, my favourite resources that I use for in-person and online teaching, but I have a whole bank. I have a whole overflowing set of drawers in my office that contain all the different resources and things that I have to keep it fun. It doesn't have to cost you a lot of money. But there are so many ideas online now that really none of us have an excuse not to be adding games and fun activities into lessons at every age, apart from when I'm just really, really tired. Then it feels a lot harder. So it's always good to have some go-tos at that point. I would build up a bank of go-to games, go-to activities, no prep, that you can call on when you just don't have the energy to create an all singing, all dancing lesson plan. And that way you can keep at least a low level of fun running through every single lesson. Principle number 2 is help them find their why. If a student is having tutoring, there is a reason for it. In a school setting, sometimes this can be harder to locate because their why might be because I have to be, but really you can dig down into that and you can find what's underlying there. In a tutoring setting, there is a reason they're having tutoring. It might be because my parents said I had to, in which case, get the parents on board, get them involved. Why do the parents think it's essential for them? How can that be communicated to the child? If the parents are able to get them to the sessions, can they also get them to engage if they come and join in or watch or are there? For older children, their why might be passing an exam or getting some kind of qualification or endpoint to move on to the next thing that they want to do. Of course, that's going to motivate you if you can keep that in mind, but particularly with teenagers, it can be difficult to keep that at the front of their minds. For younger children, their why will usually be because it's fun. I like coming to these lessons. We play games. I have a great time. Just keep digging down into that. You don't have to talk about it constantly, but if you know their why and they know their why, then that's a great solid starting point to go from. If you feel like you can't find it, it will be there. It will be there somewhere. It just might take a lot of time and relationship building to find it. Principle number 3, work with their interests. This can be with a group, but it works especially well, obviously, for one-to-one. This is part of the reason I absolutely adore tutoring. You're able to follow people's interests, strengths, areas they want to develop. So for younger students, this could be a theme. I've done them on animals, countries, playing, things like dolls, Lego. The possibilities are endless. If you're working with children, you know they will have an inexhaustible supply of ideas for things they want to do and games they want to play. Incorporate that into the learning. Again, it sounds obvious, but it is definitely harder to do in practice than it sounds in principle, I know. And you can also follow this principle with adults. You can work with their interests. If you're teaching older teenagers and adults, it might be their preferred learning style. By that point, they'll probably know how they like information to be communicated, the sorts of activities that they like doing, how they like to learn and revise and take in information. Work with that. Make a partnership between you and the student. Make yourselves a team. Number 4 is something that I think a lot of people don't do for various reasons, but it's ask for feedback. And this is at any age. Don't try to mind read when you don't need to. Obviously, there's some children who find it harder to communicate than others, but there are still ways to go about getting their feedback on what you've done so far. Was there an activity that you particularly enjoyed today? What shall we do again next week? What did you enjoy the most? You can use all the different non-verbal communication styles, like rating on scales of 1 to 5, using pictures to put in order from my most favourite to my least favourite. Find out what has worked for them and then build on that. I'm not saying do exactly the same thing every week, but if you have an idea of the kind of learning they've enjoyed, it's worked for them, then you can begin to move forward with that. And it also creates a safe space for them to be able to tell you if they don't like something or they're not comfortable with something or they don't understand, and creates a really solid foundation for learning. With students that find it really difficult to access any learning at all, maybe they have some school-based trauma, then this can be built up through really gentle, playful, non-academic activities at first. If they start feeling confident to tell you what they're enjoying and what they're not, maybe getting to the point where they can ask for help, then you can start to introduce something that's going to challenge them, which for them is probably how they perceive learning activities. But if you can build up that two-way communication and involve them in the plan, in the ideas, then you're winning. It does take time. This is not a quick fix. It can take months, but it is so worth it. And principle number 5, it's the key to it all. It's build that relationship. You'll get to know them. They're more likely to attempt challenging things at that point. They're also more likely to look forward to lessons. If you get on and they want to see you and they know that you're starting with Jenga because that's the game they love, or they know that you're going to play that game that they designed in their lesson last week and they finally get to play it with you, or they know that they're making that video that they planned with you last week. When you've got that relationship that's been built up through ongoing lessons, that is the trick to it. There will be tricky lessons, there'll be tricky weeks, tricky days, but the relationship is what will sustain you through that. Now, my one caveat to that is I really do believe that no teacher is the right teacher for every child. In the same way that you're not friends with everybody, you don't get on with everybody, I don't expect everybody to like me, I cannot be every child's perfect teacher. So while I really do believe those principles work, I also think some people click better than others. And if I was not the right teacher for a child, I would want them to find someone who was. Thankfully, that hasn't happened yet in my tutoring business, but never say never, it absolutely could. And that is not a failing. If anything, that's a really strong decision to be able to make and really strong feedback to be able to give. However, I think that is a tiny, tiny percentage of student-teacher relationships. For most children, I really believe that starting from these principles works, and we'll get them to the point where they're able to engage with learning and they're able to go on and achieve great things. I would also say I do not just apply these with children who struggle with engaging with learning. This works for everybody, and if anything, it will only up their engagement, up their enjoyment, and hopefully up their success. I hope you found those thoughts useful. I think they're things that most teachers do know, but when we're so caught up in day-to-day, rushing around, getting lessons planned and delivered and on to the next thing, it can be hard to keep them in mind and hard to keep them at the forefront of our mind when we feel like we've just run out of ideas or we're drained. So I hope that was a helpful reminder. Let me know if you have any great tips, or particularly any really great activities that are your go-tos that work every time. I would love to hear them. Pop them in the comments, and I will see you again next week. Bye.